It is always in times of political crisis or political anything when I come on the air and rant a lot. And there are a lot of people who rant on the internet who monetize their opinions. It's become an incredibly easy thing to do, particularly after COVID. After all, you're all alienated in little clusters attached to your phone, right? Ask yourself, though, in a lot of ways, have you been conned? And I don't mean by the mainstream establishment, because, of course, but I mean by other people who propose to use you for something. You see, in the old version of this intro, there's a quote by Malcolm X, a quote that I love. I don't let people use me to fight their battles. Yet a lot of people want to be used. They want the sense of meaning. They want the camaraderie. They want the social relations. Since particularly in the United States, but in a lot of developed world, the privatization of public space, the decline of civic organizations, the decline of religious groups, even however you feel about religion, has led to profoundly ideological self proclamations, aka ideological fandoms, leading people to special plead, to make excuses, to consistently make excuses. As if they were adopting Carl Smith's friend enemy distinction, but without realizing that they don't have the power to make a sovereign exception. You see, they're not sovereigns. And also, the sovereign exception was always a little bit of a myth. After all, no sovereign exists in a context of only their own nation. Yet we've gone to gurus, we've gone into sects, and the sectarian dynamics that the left prior to, in the United States, prior to entering the DSA, or in the UK, the Labour Party over Corbyn, has recapitulated itself within these spheres. The old habits aren't gone, they've just been rebranded. The entire time, people have been trying to do shortcuts and build third parties for national electoral runs without doing any of the work to build up local political machines to have that happen. You see, that, my friends, really is a grift. It shows that you either don't know or do not give a shit about local election law. If you don't care about it, then why are you doing it? The history of the United States and of most parliamentary parties means that third parties have a function of being kind of an experimental ground, but also ultimately being subsumed by the major parties. But the major parties are also corrupting. You go into those parties, and if you don't have a mass base to hold people accountable to a clear political program and to protect them from the money interests that do, you do not have grounds to change even the party from within, and definitely don't have grounds to run an outsider campaign. I get that people are frustrated with decades of horizontalism and localism, but you can't fast track that with some Bonapartes figure. That is the result of national media outlets and small niches becoming more and more important. You see, if we're going to be a materialist analysis, you know why the alternative media sucks just as bad as the old media does? It's because it only has so many ways to get money, and it's either flattery, finding some currently existing media apparatus or political apparatus to attach themselves to. Look how many people have gotten either Teal or Katzenberg money. Do not pretend like this is just a right-wing thing. Furthermore, people are also selective at what divisions they want to lean up in. We all know that Elon Musk is an incompetent twit who's ruined Twitter, except for the Elon Musk cultists and apparently most of the right. But we then selectively ignore that it really is damning that informal networks of political complaints were used for censorship, primarily by the Biden campaign, but also by the Trump campaign. And when Matt Taibbi broke this out, the response was to attack him. Now, Taibbi's politics in the last 15 years has kind of sucked from my perspective. It doesn't change what he's talking about. And what I find amazing is anytime I drop a name, Tucker Carlson, Jimmy Dore, Sam Cedar, the TYT people, etc., that's what you focus on. I will always get bad take on X, bro. I'm not in the take business. I'm not making a hot take. These are parasocial relationships that are used as heuristics of trust. Yes, you need heuristics of trust. You've never heard me say not that you don't, but you have to decide on the trustworthiness on grounds larger than it already conflates to your political fandom, thus your parasocial identity. See, these are very thin identities. It's not that they're not real identities, it's that they're thin. They're self-professed. They're moving signifiers. This is why populism and anyone who talks about the elites in vague terms is always usually trying to fool you, because they're using moving signifiers. Who are the elites? Is it the PMC? Well, who are the PMC? Well, you know it when you see it. They're the educated people who annoy you, blah, 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 blah. Well, but most of the people who are complaining about it are of that class, if it is a class. All right. There have been very rigorous attempts to combine the different class frameworks, Burdurian, Marxian, Durkheimian, Weberian, all right, from sociology, and to come up with a framework that incorporated them all. The closest thing to it is by Eric Olin Wright. I don't think it works, but at least it was honest. Cramming them together by misappropriating the insights of Barbara Ehrenreich and misusing them to create a new category of liberal boogeymen when you just can't say liberals is the same as talking about how amazing Peter Fossil's class book was from the late 80s or David Brooks's Bobos in Paradise is. That's about how thick the class analysis is. Right? It's not that Marx's class analysis is the only class analysis that's acceptable unless you're a Marxist purist. Right? I think that often different class analyses are just describing different things, but many of these are floating signifiers. The 99% versus the 1%. Meanwhile, we ally ourselves off of the new left wing of the Democrats. We're going to be able to change them through the DSA or whatever. Are the DSAs going to build an independent party? Blah, 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 blah. I pointed out that this is a fundamental misunderstanding of scale, that even though the DSA's website claims 95,000 members, the current NPC reports indicates about that maybe as little as 62K of them are actually active, and that means that are still actively paying dues. It doesn't even account for the fact that people aren't going to the chapters to meet quorum, and that the DSA is increasingly regionally concentrated in New York and California. All right, these are facts. You can get mad at me about them. They're facts. And how has the DSA bridged the gap between the locals and the national? Well, yes, there are regions and regional organizations in California and New York, and New York being the biggest, most established. Most of the time, however, caucus groups or sectarian organizations that have the same impulses of the old sects, but also have also often have impulses of labor NGO bureaucrats involved, are stuck as the gap between the two levels of the organization. So at the local level, you do good work. It's almost all volunteer work, and the money that you pay dues for doesn't go to that. Which, by the way, is going to get me to another point. You see, no gurus, no sects, no Bonapartes, no special pleading, right? This is because a lot of you are really stuck in prior investment syndrome. You have believed in something in the left. You can't make it happen. You continue to do it. Some of you for 20, 30 years of your life. Failure after failure. And that's hard to drop. Every instance of terror management theory says that leads to people doubling down. But that's what liberals and conservatives do too. You aren't special just because you have a modal political identity. Yes, leftists and liberals on Facebook and Twitter are super annoying, and sometimes you can't tell the difference between them and either. Mostly liberal Democrats are sometimes Republicans, depending on what issues they're tailing another group on. Fine and obnoxious. And it is obnoxious because it leads to special pleading. It leads to, oh my God, freak out about Elon Musk, but ignore the stuff that Matt Taibbi's leaking because Matt Taibbi has flipped sides. It doesn't lead you to ask, well, what has happened to journalism where all these journalists used to have respected pieces and did international coverage are now dicking around doing weird cultural coverage on Substacks for? Right? You haven't asked yourself what the larger fragmentation of the media sphere was and why it happened, and why, I don't know, all the people that used to be trained to go in and do normal journalism work are now doing these weird advocacy things in YouTube streams and becoming streamers. It's because the profitability in those fields has long since gone away, and you need to start doing systemic analysis as to why that happened. And there's going to be disagreements in that, but there's at least a couple of key facts we can deal with versus ideological deck chair shifting on the Titanic. I'm very mad about what happened with the quote squad and the vote. I'm very mad about the way certain members, admittedly, I don't think they represent majority opinion in any socialist organization, or even most Democrats, frankly, were able to set this up for a very cynical Senate vote that makes it look like maybe there's truth to the national the national conservative / populist reality. It's an alternate reality. See, the things are always moving and you're always being suckered. See, no gurus, no sects, no Bonapartes, no special pleading is a plea to you not to be suckered. Because to be a good solidaristic member, you got to be clear thinking. You cannot be conned by anything campus. You can't have weird special pleading and exemptions based on your emotional needs. And you have to understand, if people reject you, there's a reason why they do. You know, I always tell people the thing that you have to deal with, like, for example, with old black politicians who came up to the civil rights movement. Yes, a lot of them are corrupt. Yes, a lot of them did make deals with conservatives to keep their seats. But why do they still have a base support? Is it because their constituency is just stupid? Or is it because they've been around and reliable to deliver local things? Whereas we've had many flash pans of left-wing activism that went nowhere. Why have working class people, by that I think you mean mostly non-educated people and the working poor, not supported progressive politics, particularly if they're right? Well, one, they have if they voted, but two, most of them don't vote. And three, the reason why they don't vote or vote generally with the local elites in their area is pretty clear, because anything else has not delivered any goods. People want big change, but if you just promise it and never deliver it, which everyone from progressives to socialists to, frankly, the moral majority and the old Reagan coalition, always holding it out, and then and then baiting and switching you to defend them from an attack somewhere else. And if you don't think the Democrats are doing it, do you think they're going to figure out a way to fix the Roe v. Wade problem? Do you really? Because as long as they don't, you show up to vote in purple states. There's a reason why the average working class person doesn't trust the progressives. There's a reason why the average black person doesn't trust the progressives. And for all the him and hawing you see on social media networks, every Pew poll I've seen in the last year indicates that while the Democrats are still more popular than the Republicans, progressives and leftists are a toxic brand. And why are they a toxic brand? Not because people don't agree with their beliefs. Their beliefs poll popularly over and over and over again. Well, people just either think that, oh, people vote against their class interests because they're stupid, or B, well, it must be corporate shenanigans. No, it's actually quite simple. You don't deliver it. Even when you are in power, and most of the left has never been in power in the United States, you don't deliver that. Why would they trust you? Why won't they go with something who they can cynically figure out how to stably manipulate at a local level? That's going to be true for identities, for classes, etc. That's obvious. Furthermore, just calling for unity, be it unity of us against them in populism, us against whatever the elites are, or unity of the class, and you don't actually address why those class divisions exist and why there are subdivisions within them and what the tensions are, and just call for more unity, hold the line. That shit never works. Fuck, even nationalism doesn't work unless the Germans are at your goddamn border. Nationalism is used for kicking out occupiers, and that's about it. No sects, no gurus, no Bonapartes, no special pleading. Think. Because you have a duty to cultivate yourself if you're going to be part of collective. You have a duty to be better, right? You have a duty not to lean into the victimization that happens to you. Not just for you, not for any individual reason, but because you are part of something larger than yourself. That is why you do it. That is also why the social context matters for people in recovery. That is also why the social context matters for people who have emotional disabilities, mental handicaps, etc. People will help be made better because they will do it because they are bettered in their relationships with other people. For a long time, I thought the sectarian thinking or the joy of getting into Bernie Sanders turned the DSA from a fading movement that had 2,000 members and at most it ever had 5,000 to a organization larger than the SDS in the 1960s. But Bernie Sanders is gone. Yes, he's still alive, but he's ancient. And you haven't figured out how to replace him. The whole moment seems like it was a sui generis fever dream. See also Corbyn in the UK, because it's not just here where this has happened. All right? What is driving this are things larger than you, larger than your political ideology, and you need to figure out the way to build systems, peoples, and communities that can deal with that. Instead of special pleading on Twitter about this, that, or the other. About why you should be mad about when a tech billionaire does one thing, but not mad about when dumbass tech billionaires do another, because the same informal, loosey-goosey networks are driving both. No, climate doomerism is not an answer, but I can tell you that things are going to get a lot worse, particularly with climate, since it's going to increase pressures. Increased pressures tends to increase people's anxiety. And if you study complex systems and complex societies, there's two ways you can respond. One is to adapt, and the other is to die. If you make excuses, if you double down, which is what we are wont to do for terror management, it is how we see ourselves as saving ourselves for the future. It is saving our identities and ideas. But that, in and of itself, often leads to the reverse. It ironically and almost dialectically and paradoxically leads to you doing things that makes you unadaptable, rigid, and breakable. You have a duty, if you want to engage in this, to be better and to not be fooled. Don't be fooled in thinking a Slack channel of like 100 people is a political party just because it can get some people's names on a few ballots in a couple of states. Don't be fooled in thinking that you're going to be able to hold politicians accountable when you don't have the resources to do so. And if you expel them from your organization, it isn't even going to do that much. Don't be fooled about the incentives in that. Think about systems. Don't be fooled and just hoping, oh, left unity, oh, class unity, oh, without looking at how that disunity got there and why you have to change a bunch of things, including about yourself, to make it happen. And don't trust anyone just because it flatters you, including me. Like and subscribe. Here's my patrons. I feel really weird having to do that after this rant, but I have an obligation, a bourgeois obligation, you might say, to the people who give me $10 a month. And I'm going to fulfill that obligation right now, one of many of mine to them. I would like to thank Kano Kohanens, Evan W., Lincoln H., Exo Andrea, MK, Philbert Robotic, and Joshua B. Thank you so much for your support. It means a lot to me. Hopefully I can continue doing decent education. Have a good day, people. And even though I'm mad, I'm going to be coming back with some more moderate educational content on things I've been promising. I've finally got some of the episodes booked on the nationalism series for nailing it down with Gene Bajelon. Gene and I are going to be talking about a bunch of books. We're going to be doing audio essays, maybe. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff. That is coming. I am finally beginning to do more of the essay writing for the Lash book. Be looking for me to actually publish essays after Christmas, and I write some. You can, hopefully. Sometimes just doing this ephemeral media doesn't matter. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Bye.